So what we're talking about tonight is flashpacking Europe. Now, you guys might be wondering what that means. It's not rocket science, guys, but there are some very important and practical tips that I'm excited to share with you guys tonight to not only make the most of your time or your money, but also your experience, getting over to Europe and experience these rich and unforgettable cultures through some of the most amazing and exciting cities on the planet. So, travel is changing really quickly. Now we have computers in our pockets, we're constantly connected, we're messaging our friends, Snapchatting our friends, Instagramming, and doing all of these different things. And what I want to talk about tonight is integrating this into your experience so that you can really maximize your time and your budget while you travel. So, first let's get into my background. I was born with the blessing and the curse of getting born into this guy's family, Rick Steves. He'd go over to Europe about Easter time and stay over until August, so of course that's a long time to be away from your family. So my dear mother, my sister, and I would go visit him wherever he was in Europe to break up these long trips. He also took it upon himself to teach me how to travel from a very early age. So what this means, for example, is in Paris, he would put me on the next metro car, tell me where to change and where to get off, and then be like, all right, see you on the other end. And this is when I was like 8 or 9 years old. So when I say I'm happy to be here, I really am happy to be here. We played everything from grumpy teenagers on this TV show to even a Swiss Santa Claus. Funny side note about the Swiss Christmas tradition, Stanislaus, their St. Nicholas figure, actually has an evil sidekick named Schmutzli. This guy in the black cape and this mean-looking beard and these branches strapped to his waist. Now, what the Swiss children believe is that if you're a bad kid, not only are you going to get, coal in your stockings, but Schmutzli is going to come in the middle of the night and throw you into this bag and take you out in the back and beat you with those branches. So not only, do you get coal in your stockings, you also get bruises and welts. So needless to say, the Swiss children are very well behaved. They take care of their chores, they feed the donkeys, all that good stuff. But, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about how to maximize your travels. And, like I said earlier, travel is evolving. It's much different from the demographic or the kind of the style of travel that my dad grew up in and did a large part in pioneering, I guess. So what I've been doing over the last, 5 years is I started a student tour company after having studied abroad in Rome in 2008. When I studied abroad, it opened up a completely new continent to me, and I got the chance to actually plug into the local cultures and integrate a little bit, and that really opened my eyes to what is important when it comes to travel. It's all about bringing the right mindset, plugging yourself into the local experiences, getting off the beaten tourist track. But that's not only it. The second half of that equation is logistics. What that means is knowing how to get from point A to point B, what to do when you're there, how to organize your time, and where to stay along the way. For the purposes of this talk, I do this talk to study abroad students all the time. The hottest thing in American colleges these days is to get out of the country, it seems. It's climbing like crazy. People are going to Sydney, Tokyo, Florence, Barcelona, all these amazing different cities to study abroad and spend, 4 or 5 months in another culture, which I think is so important and so rewarding. But now what we're doing today is we're talking about how to organize your travel, and it's not, you guys won't be staying put in one place. Rather, you guys will come over and do your circuit and then come back home. So what I've done is go through kind of putting together a hypothetical trip. And I've done the hard work for you guys already. We're going to check out Barcelona, Rome, maybe some Madrid, Prague, Amsterdam, and Edinburgh. When you guys begin to start planning your travel, we got to get over to Europe in the first place, right? So we're looking at these long-haul flights. And when it comes to flying from Seattle over to Europe, for example, it's so important to pick not only the destination that you want to end up in, rather look at the hubs, when it comes to Europe. So look at London, Paris, Frankfurt, Madrid sometimes, and Amsterdam. When you're looking at your long-haul flights to get from Seattle to these main hubs, it's so much easier to connect through the rest of the continent. And then after that, what you're going to do is start to organize it in a plan that makes sense. For this time, and in this situation, we're going to go north to south because I was just over in Edinburgh myself, and it gets really cold there in November, all right? So we want to get Edinburgh in before it gets too cold, say if we're going over in the fall when the weather is getting increasingly colder. So it makes sense to start up in Edinburgh and then work your way south. Also pay attention to local festivals and anything else that's going to be happening in Europe, in these cities that you're thinking about going to during your travel, all right? So this is the itinerary that we're going to work out. We're going to start up in Edinburgh, continue on to Amsterdam, make our way over to Prague where they have amazing beer, the land of goulash and pointy spires. Going to hop on down to Rome where there's incredible ancient history, art, and architecture, and then hop on over to Barcelona where there's some amazing tapas to experience, the Sagrada Familia, which is my favorite church in the world, and then wrap up our trip in Madrid, where again there's some incredible culture to check out as well. So that's kind of the route that we're going to do tonight. Let's start up in Edinburgh. When you guys start picking your cities, keep in mind this idea of painting in from the outside in, right? So you got the cities that you want to go to. Now, the next step is to figure out, okay, what am I going to do in that place? There's guidebooks out there, like Let's Go. Rick Steves is great as well, but for me and the people that I work with, his recommendations tend to be very expensive and I just can't afford it, you know. So the way I start is, of course, I look at guidebooks as well, but what's also really important is to utilize TripAdvisor and Yelp. Now, look at these two crowdsourced websites is what they're called. These are crowdsourced websites, and it lets anybody get onto the website and say anything they want about any of these places. Whether they've been to one restaurant or 100, you still get your vote and you can say whatever you want. So what I'm always looking for when it comes to these sites is what I like to call collective intelligence, okay? And I took a screenshot of Yelp here to kind of illustrate that point. Again, anybody can come on and say, if they've been to, you know, one restaurant in Paris, they can get on and say it's the worst restaurant in Paris or the best restaurant in Paris. But, you know, what I'm looking for is the collective intelligence in order to get a better idea of what that restaurant might have to offer. And we're also looking at TripAdvisor. One thing that TripAdvisor is great at doing is giving you kind of the top sites that you might want to consider consider checking out. So they're going to be the most touristy sites. They're going to be the ones that might be reviewed over 7,000 times, you know. But what that does is it gives you kind of a checklist of things that you're going to want to see. Now match those places up with what your guidebooks say, as well as asking around with your friends. And by consolidating all of that information, then you can begin to tailor your trips to whatever things that interest you most. You know, whether it's more art, or more history, or say literature, other things that can get you excited, you know, I guess organize your travel by those different venues. Here's a screenshot of Yelp as well, and the excellent thing about Yelp is you can zoom in by neighborhood based on, you know, what you're looking for. For restaurants, you can zoom into the touristy, you know, Royal Mile, or you can get out of that as well. So it's a great way to, again, kind of do your initial research to know what's going on in each of the cities. From there, now that we're in Edinburgh, you know, all of these European cities have excellent public transportation systems. I've been living in Europe for about 8 months a year now for the last 5 years, and I don't need a car, and I don't want a car. So a lot of Americans might go to Europe thinking that you want to rent a car, but that is just a major headache. So, you know, it's so much better to use public transportation. And the amazing thing is, all these cities have these apps that do an amazing job at even telling you where your tram or your bus or your subway is along the route. It'll tell you ahead of time, and they do a great job at kind of giving you the lay of the land as well. Now, when it comes to how to get from city to city in Europe, and, you know, booking these airlines, I'll always book directly with that airline. Like I was saying, one of the main reasons is because if you go with a site like eDreams or Travelocity, their business model is they make a bet on how expensive they think these rates are going to be. And if for some reason that flight price changes, what happens is you get an email like this saying, hey, by the way, that flight that you booked is going to be another 25 euros if you still want to go, so let us know what you want to do. For me, I prefer to avoid that headache and skip that and just book directly with that airline. It tends to work out quite well. And you got to read every single bit of fine print. And here's why. It's because they get you in with a low initial cost, maybe 20 bucks or something. But if you don't check in online ahead of time, that's 40 euros. If you have to check in a bag at the airport, that's 40 or 50 euros. If you have to print out your boarding pass, again, 40 or 50 euros. And that's just one way. So very quickly, you know, those hidden fees can add up to well beyond the cost of your initial ticket, all right? So keep that in mind. I'm not saying, you know, don't fly with them, but if you're organized, you skip those fees, all right? So just keep that in mind when you think you're going to go with Ryanair over another airline like British Airways. I'm kind of ragging on Ryanair in this bit here, but they deserve it, and they, they have it coming. So you printed out your boarding pass, you paid for your bag online ahead of time, and you checked in online ahead of time. All right, you're not done yet. So you're going to have this on the top left corner of your boarding pass. And it's just one more hoop that they make you jump through. They look at your passport for a second, give you a stamp, and you're good to go. So just do that before you go through security if you're flying with Ryanair. All right? And so this has to do with the boarding pass that I was just talking about. So every time I book a flight online, I get a confirmation to my email account that I booked the trip with. And TripIt is a company that is incredible. So you get your confirmation email. If you forward that email directly to plans@tripit.com, and it populates all your flight information, all your confirmation codes, your boarding times, your terminal, all of that in one place. So it's super slick, and it can also handle accommodations as well. So definitely consider getting TripIt to keep track of your flights. So we're going to kind of shift in towards kind of banking and budgeting tips that I've picked up along the way. This was a screenshot from a flight that I was booking with Airlines. And what you're going to see every time you use your card, whether it's in person or online, is this super sneaky option to pay a guaranteed amount in your US dollars, all right? But what they do is they're saying, hey, we can guarantee that this is the amount that's going to come out of your American dollar denominated account back home. Click here if you prefer not to accept the guaranteed amount. So if you don't check that box, which is by default, then you're going to pay 141 bucks for that flight. But that day, I knew that the euro was trading to the dollar at about 119, 120. So just in order to see that amount in US dollars, I was paying another 20 bucks. And this is by default. So anytime you use your card online or in person at a store, you're going to have this option to pay in US dollars or the local currency. It's always better to pay in the local currency and opt out of paying in US dollars. Additionally, Europe has come a long ways. They used to be almost entirely cash-based, like you get bad looks if you try to pay with your card. But now most stores in touristy areas almost always take card. But another thing to keep in mind, my mom always taught me to not be penny wise and pound foolish. Using the budget airline example, your Ryanair flight might be 20 euros at first, but then you have those extra fees on top. And say if you're going from Paris to Barcelona, they don't actually fly from Paris airport to a Barcelona airport. They're going to fly you out of Beauvais, which is a regional airport about an hour and a half outside of Paris, and then fly you into Girona, which is another city well outside of Barcelona, about an hour and a half as well. And each of those buses to the airport and from the airport cost 20 euros. And so you're going to be paying at each step along the way and paying much more than you would have if you just sprung for one of those more expensive initial cost flights. You guys follow me on that? So, just using that as an example, always go into these big purchases with a big picture view and try to tally up all those different costs that you'll encounter in order to make the smartest decision along the way. And then on the fly, while you guys are traveling around, I always use XE in order to kind of calibrate any cost that I'm seeing to make sure, because those zeros, when it comes to Hungarian forints, are really hard to keep track of. And say if you're trying to pull out cash and you forget, should I pull out 2,000 crown or 20,000 crown? That way you can kind of check. So, like I was saying earlier, there's more traveling that's happening throughout Europe than ever before. There are millions and millions of people going to Europe to go to these old, tiny medieval cities, and lines are longer than they've ever been outside of each of these major cliche touristy sites. I can tell you exactly what sites that you're going to want to see, whether we're talking about Amsterdam, Berlin, Rome, Barcelona, Paris, and guess what? All the other middle-class Chinese and Indian and American and Canadians and everybody else are going to Europe for the first time. That's exactly what they're going to want to see too. And so these lines are getting longer and longer and longer. So it's definitely worthwhile now to go ahead, go online, and book your ticket ahead of time. So, whether it's in Amsterdam, the things to look for, of course, are the Anne Frank House and the Van Gogh Museum. In Paris, that's the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre, of course. In Rome, that's the Colosseum and the Vatican. Those major sites are well worth booking ahead of time so that you cannot deal with lines like this, especially if you only have a couple days in each of these cities. This line can stretch for 2 to 4 hours even. And so, that'll take a big chunk out of, your 2 days in each of these cities if you fail to make reservations online ahead of time. So consider that, and it's definitely worth doing that. And By this time in our trip, I was thinking we all might be getting a little homesick. We might want to call our mom back home and check in and say hi. So what I wanted to talk about here is, phoning and communication. How to stay in touch with your loved ones and your friends back home, as well as stay in touch with other friends who are traveling as well. Using Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi hotspots are all over Europe. You have no need to worry about staying connected on free Wi-Fi. You pop into any cafe, you get a coffee, they'll give you your Wi-Fi password, no matter what city you're in. So, and including Starbucks, they're all over the place in Europe as well. So that should be the only reason that you go to Starbucks while traveling. So anyway, Skype, Viber, FaceTime, WhatsApp, Kik, those are all free ways to stay in touch with people. And I would just recommend downloading them all, trying them out, and see which ones you prefer. WhatsApp is one of the more popular ones. That's just texting. If you have an iPhone and your family members also have iPhones, you can iMessage for free, which is just texting. But if you're texting and a blue little box shows up, that means that would be free if you're on Wi-Fi anywhere in the world. So you got that, as well as FaceTime is a great way to video chat too. So Facebook even offers that as well. So you have all these options to stay in touch. When it comes to smartphones, I have an iPhone with AT&T. I call them up every time I go abroad, and I call them to suspend my account. And what that does is it drops my monthly charge to $10, and I just use it as a Wi-Fi device while I'm abroad. Or I purchase local SIM cards and plug those into my unlocked phone and use data and pay-as-you-go credits throughout the trip. So Prague is where I actually live when I'm over in Europe, and I absolutely love it. It's an incredible city, very affordable, easy to get around both throughout Europe and around the town itself. And I want to take this chance to talk about accommodation. Okay, so we've talked about getting around locally, we've talked about flying around, and now where you stay can make or break your experience in each of these cities. Now, I don't know that much about hotels because I don't stay in hotels. I much prefer to either stay in hostels or on Airbnb. But first off, forget everything that the movie taught you. Hostels are fun, they're safe, and they're clean. There was a horror movie called Hostel, a few years ago, so everybody's terrified of them. But, I actually have a blast in hostels, and I have a richer experience in hostels. The more that you pay, to stay in a 2-star, a 3-star, a 5-star hotel, yeah, they're going to be absolutely comfortable, but the more that you pay only serves to insulate yourself from the culture that you're there to experience at the end of the day. I love the social environment in hostels. You get to meet people from all around the world. You make friends really quickly. You stay in bunk rooms like this with often purpose-built bunks. And what you'll find now is that each of these little pods have their own plug for phone charging, their own reading light, their ensuite bathroom. So you can find some real gems in hostels. And this hostel room in Prague costs, last time I checked, $12 a night. So it's easy to spend $200 a night, or you can spend $12 a night, get some earplugs, and make some friends, and go out and have a good time with them. Now, if you're going to stay in hostels, it's really important for you to consider, do I want a social hostel or a quiet hostel? Do I want a bar in the hostel, or do I want something, a little more low-key? What's my, budget versus do I want to stay in the absolute center of town versus the outside of town? You should be considering each of these aspects along the way, and then looking deep into the reviews in order to understand what each hostel might have to offer. Now, a lot of hostels that you're seeing now have kind of a blend between a kind of a budget hotel and hostel dorm rooms to have, say, 6 beds or 8 beds or 10 beds, and then in this same hostel you have a private double room, which might be, say, $35 a night. But it's great because you have, all the space of a private room without losing the social aspect of a bar downstairs. So you can have great experiences no matter what you're looking for in hostels. And hostelworld.com, there's plenty of other booking websites out there like Hostel Bookers, hostels.com, but Hostel World has bought all of those, so just go to hostelworld.com. Now let's talk about Airbnb. Have most people heard about Airbnb in the house, or yeah? Okay, so Airbnb is a way that it's just like Uber, but for apartments, okay? So people have realized that there's huge capacity to share, to allow, fellow travelers and fellow travelers to come in, and they rent out either their spare bed, spare room, or entire apartment. And that's exactly what I do in Prague. And so this is where I live in Prague, and I absolutely love it. There's no chance in heck could I afford a place that's this nice, you know, right here at the end of Charles Bridge. But I'm in it to cover my rent and also make a little bit of cash on the side. And that's another thing to keep in mind with Airbnb. When you're looking at the various profiles online, read for, are these guys just trying to make money, you know, like me and my business partner, or are they a local that actually is like passionate about kind of pointing you the way and sharing what to do in each of these cities, you know, so you also have a bit of a different experience there. The upside when it comes to Airbnb is you get your own apartment, you get your own kitchen, you get your place to, you know, make your own, but the drawback is you don't have a receptionist who can make reservations for you, make calls or recommend things. So again, all of these different things are trade-offs, and it's up to you to look at all these different reviews and all these categories by which something can be rated. Keep all of that in mind while you guys are looking into your accommodations. Now, from Prague, we're going to zip on down to Rome. There's some incredible festivals all across Europe. You know, there's the Tomatina in Spain. I've been in Rome for Easter for the last few years, leading a tour, and you can get up-close views of Papa Francesco, of course. And, you know, these views are absolutely amazing, and it really adds something special to your trip. And what I want to encourage you guys to do is kind of brainstorm, what are the things that get you excited? Are you into, say, art festivals or photography galleries? What is it, and what other events? What gets you excited back here? And then organize your travels by what's happening throughout Europe, because that's the way that you can really customize your experience. You know, St. Patty's in Dublin, of course, is always a good time. King's Day in Amsterdam. We made it to Venice for Carnivale when I was studying abroad. Got in silly street fights with these little devil children. But, you know, so these are really unique experiences to be had, but the crowds can absolutely change your experience. It's absolutely overwhelming, so you're going to need to plan well in advance for those major events that are happening in those cities. Another thing is bring your hobbies and your passions and your interests with you over to Europe. Just because you're going over to Europe, that shouldn't mean that, okay, I'm not going to do anything that I'm interested in, I'm just going to do what TripAdvisor and all the guidebooks tell me to do, right? That shouldn't happen. Bring your hobbies and your interests and your passions with you over to Europe. For me, I was on the cycling team while I was studying back at Notre Dame, and then when I was abroad, I joined a local cycling club, and what I found is that immediately it connected me with locals of a completely different background, but by chasing down what I was interested in, it put me in the same place as other people who shared that same interest. And from there, I was able to actually build a friendship and relationships off of riding with these guys for hours at a time. And for me, that was really special and something I'll never forget. So this was 2005. I had just graduated high school, and me and my best buddy Alex, this is his face and this is half of my face here, we were going through the south of France. And we realized that, holy cow, if we took a detour out of our planned itinerary, we could actually catch a stage of the Tour de France as it goes into the French Alps. And before we knew it, so these are the amateur cyclists riding the course before the real race comes through that afternoon. And you got the Belgians in front of us. And you got the Koreans next to us. You gotta get the peace sign, right? So fast forward to that afternoon. We find a perch from which to watch this festival on wheels come through. And it really was a festival. It was a massive caravan. There were sponsor trucks, team cars, police cars, organizer trucks. All of these guys coming through, VIP cars. Keep in mind, we're in the absolute boonies of France. So all the sounds that you hear and all the people that you see are there for the same reason. That creates like an unforgettable energy to be among. So this is Lance's last year before he retired, but to be here, I still get goosebumps talking about it because it's so darn cool. So here he comes. There's Lance in the blue. So 2 days out of our trip to see those 2 seconds, and then two days to catch back up. to our planned itinerary. But for Alex and I mean, you heard how excited we were, right? Like we were screaming at the top of our lungs. For us, it was so special because that's what we were interested in. And chasing down these events that, for me personally, I really love, that's when I started realizing that travel is, one, all about the people that you meet while you travel. That's what makes your trips unforgettable and special. I mean, where else but on the side of the Tour de France can you get as excited about seeing men in spandex with shaved legs riding bikes up the mountain as the French grandma next to you, you know, and these guys, you know, it's so special to be there at that point in time. So, another great way to meet locals along the way is to be an extrovert. You know, push yourself outside of your bubble and strike up a conversation with the people that you might not necessarily talk to throughout your trip. Push yourself to just strike up a random conversation with people. And it goes a long ways if you do a couple things. You know what's important to the people that you're visiting. Understand, you know, what are the politics going on in the cities? What are the sports teams that are important to support or not support? You know, is cost of living a huge issue for the young people in the country? Is unemployment? You know what the current events are in each of these places. I think one of the most important things to do is just try out a little bit of local language. You know please and thank you and hello and goodbye in the very basics in each of the countries that you go to visit, because people really appreciate that. I'd often go to this guy's place. He had a student bar and restaurant in Rome. I'd go to his place, have a coffee, practice my Italian, and just kind of strike up a conversation with him. And before long, I became friends with the guy. And one day he comes to me and says, "Andy, I have a couple extra tickets to the Swiss Guard induction ceremony tomorrow afternoon inside the Vatican. Would you like to go?" I was like, "I don't know, Mickey, I'm kind of a busy guy." Yeah, of course I wanted to go. So the next day I found myself inside a private event in an interior courtyard, watching, you know, them usher in the freshman class of the Swiss Guard, an event that I never would have been able to write into my itinerary, but just because I put myself out there and made this connection, that you never know what sort of networks you open up beyond that person and what sort of incredible experiences that you might have. So let's hop across the Mediterranean and continue on to Barcelona. You know, one of the best ways to experience culture is through food, you know. You should not be going from Starbucks to McDonald's. If you're doing that, that's wrong. You know, just remember that. It's wrong. It's not what you went all the way over to Europe to do. Keep that in mind and try out the local delicacies. For the most part, they're delicious. But that shouldn't stop you either from trying out what might not be so tasty. You know, like haggis in Edinburgh, or raw herring in Amsterdam, or anchovies, for example, in Barcelona. But you know, most of the time, these things are the most delicious things in the world. Like jamón and manchego is what I eat like non-stop. Churros with chocolate. This is Spanish hot chocolate. If you look closely, that doesn't look like our hot chocolate with like powder and water. No, it's just basically melted hot chocolate. So you know, try each of those along the way. And be training yourself to identify what's a touristy restaurant and what's not a touristy restaurant. If all you hear is the local language and nobody can communicate to you and everybody's looking at you like you're a unicorn because they've never seen a tourist there before, you found a winner. You know, because what I'm saying is that it's so much better to find those mom and pop shops, you know, that depend on the quality of their food, quality of their service, fairness of their prices, to get those return local customers. Because otherwise, if you just go to those big, bright, obnoxious, restaurants with neon sign and neon lighting on the fronts, you're just a statistic to them. You know, they don't care what your individual experience is like because they know they got thousands of other tourists coming through after you. But for you, it's your only time in Barcelona. It's your only time in Paris. So find those local places in order to have those, you know, much more kind of interesting experiences along the way. But also understand the exciting things that are happening in each of these cities, because they have rich and deep cultural identities, you know, and they manifest themselves in very interesting ways. So check this out. This is a typical dance that just happens kind of spontaneously every Sunday morning in front of the cathedral in Barcelona. And in the city, which possibly has the worst pickpocketing problem, everybody just leaves their bags and purses in the middle. But check this out. It's a really cool representation of the community as well. You have everybody comes here, joins hands, kind of combines all their belongings in the middle and dances around it in a kind of a celebration of unity and community. And so, you know, each of these things along the way, including football matches, you know, which are incredible in any city that you go to throughout Europe, are just really cool things that are happening whether you're there or not, but really kind of enrich your visits throughout each of these stops. Now, Madrid, this is our last stop, guys. Has anybody in the house seen bullfights? Check this out, this entire stadium is packed with Spanish families. I'm not a card-carrying member of PETA or anything, but it still kind of offended my delicate American sensibilities, you know, but it also served to kind of highlight that, again, as a traveler, it's not my place to come in and judge what's good or what's bad. Luckily, I was sitting next to a rather talkative and verbose Spaniard who broke down the entire tradition and history behind bullfighting, and he kind of opened my eyes to the fact that these bulls are treated like kings their entire life, you know, and they revere these animals, and they mount that bull's head on the wall and remember that bull for years, all that good stuff. You know, and in the same breath, he was like, I know this is controversial, but what about you Americans keeping, you know, your chickens in cages so small they can't even open their wings their entire life, all for your chicken nuggets? You know, to us Spaniards, that idea is much more offensive than having a bullfight. You know, so again, just reminded me that's not my place to judge what's good or what's bad, but to just kind of observe, learn from it, and learn about the history and tradition behind it. Because anything that's rubbing you the wrong way is always going to have a story behind it. So, you know, I hope what I've done tonight is touched on a little bit of logistics, a little bit of bringing the right mindset while we're traveling. You know, if you guys blend those together, you're sure to go to Europe and have an unforgettable time, making friends along the way, and with as little stress as possible. So guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. First off, I want to thank so much to REI and Jamie for hosting us, and Hostling International and Kayla for having me speak tonight. Thanks so much for everybody for coming out, and have a wonderful week.